Welcome to another stream here at Lightingbot. I am your host Amit, and today we have a returning guest named Sourabh. He was actually one of the first guests when we started last year. He has secretly been working on a game called Grass on the Other Side, which is a photography type of game. And there's a lot of things in his game that he's still working on that we want to cover, but we only cover weather effects today. And if you like this stream and if you like the talk we're doing today, you can always like, subscribe, and share this stream even when we're live. And then we'll know to invite him back yet again for some more insight on how he's doing the work. So let's please welcome Sourabh to the stream. Hey, Sourabh.
Hey Amit, thanks for having me again and letting me talk about things I like.
Such a chilling vibe. Just, hey, what's up?
It's great to be back and just yapping on without anyone stopping me about the things I like to do.
That's good. How's your day, though? Is it all right?
Just going good. It's a
It's morning, right?
sunny, yeah, it's a sunny Seattle today. We don't get a lot of those.
It's sunset here, more or less. So that's why it's so dark here. I
hmm
can almost not see me anymore. That's how dark the lighting is. I really should change the lighting so I can see myself a bit better. But let's just talk a little bit about what you've been doing since last time. It's been I think 9, 10 months or so, something since we last had you. And you've been working on a game called Grass on the Other Side. So for people who are new, give us a bit of an intro to your project, your top secret project.
Top secret project. Yeah, I mean, like that's not my main job, just so everyone knows. Like, I work at Turn 10 on Forza, but like, yeah, I think like about a year and a half back, I'm just like, oh, I'll make this explorable portfolio piece where you can just like s- uh, play and then like walk around. And it started as that idea, and now it like grew into this. Oh, it's gonna be a full-fledged game with like a story and like gameplay mechanics and like music and everything. So it just started as like something small, and now it's like become this personal passion project that I do on the side.
Cool. And while you were talking, let me spam the Discord so people can get remembered that we are on, even though we have an event on. As usual, for people watching already, remember you can ask your question as well. This is obviously beyond my head, all of the stuff the Sorop is about to talk about and share as well. So there's going to be a lot of stupid questions from my side because I don't really have a lot of idea of how he does half of the stuff. So it will be a good opportunity for us to dive deep on how Sorop does the stuff. And obviously, we will cover the dynamic weather system that he uses, bit of about lighting, and then we'll just take it from there, depending on how tired we are and how much we can keep up with the complexity behind this. So, Sorop, do you want to share your screen, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you want to dance? Do you want to just listen to Bollywood music and kind of shake it, shake it?
You don't want to see me
Uh,
dance?
Hey, Luke Skywalker, thank you again for tuning in. It's always good with loyal supporters and loyal viewers. That is very much appreciated.
There we go.
And here we have the live footage of Grass on the Other Side. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about first, why are you doing this? Why are you making this project? What's the point?
It's a good question. I ask that to myself every day, but no, it's just like so. For me at work, I do more of the technical stuff, which is what my role implies, right? I'm a technical lighting artist. I don't get to exercise a lot of my creative outlet at work, and like it's an itch that I need to sort of like satisfy every now and then. So like this, my personal project is like as of me sort of just like doing what I want to do in my own little world, right? So that's basically what I'm doing, and it's also like a nice playground. That's what it is. Like I just like go there, I see some cool stuff online. I'm like, oh, that'll be cool to implement that. I do it, I learn something from it, and just expand my knowledge, right?
And how long have you been working on this?
Um, think it's been over a year and a half. I started like not in 2021, 20 I think 2020 December.
Right.
So we're 2022 now, so about a year and a half.
Wow. And how did you actually start doing your project, and how are you deciding what to add? Is there a long-term plan behind the project, or are you just going with the flow?
There's definitely a way more solid plan now. I was going with the flow with the longest time. Like I would just have like the whole project was about feature creeps. I would see something cool in a game I played or something all cool on Twitter. I'm like, oh, I'll just implement that. For the longest time, that's what it became, and it was like very not very focused. But then like I started like creating proper schedules and like things to work on. So like now because of that, now it's a little bit more focused and there's a direction it's going in.
Right. So let's talk about one of the. Hey Edwin, thanks for coming and tuning in. Appreciate it. Um, so let's talk about the weather system, because obviously that's one of the things you're pretty proud of, and probably something that's not straightforward always to do. And a lot of people might want to have some weather system in their
Mhm.
project. So let's figure out, let's dissect this weather system of yours. So let's start with the basic introduction of it, how it works.
Sure, yeah. So like mostly since I'm a tech artist, I've been living in blueprints, sort of like in Unreal for like the longest time. So like 90% of the project is like blueprint based, and like I'm just starting to integrate some C++ into it. So like my entire weather system is built on blueprints. Basically, like I guess like the biggest core was like, hey, I need like obviously dynamic sky with like clouds changing, the composition of the sky changing. Like there's gonna be a global wind that affects anything that can affect like the trees, any cloud simulation, the water, even the particles, like all affected by this global wind that changes. And also have like rain, lightning, storm, and when it starts like raining, you want like the whole world to start dynamically generating puddles, and there's gonna be wetness, droplets, water trickling down. So like this whole rounded up like shenanigans that you see in like a lot of games that have weather system. Um, so most of it is tied through one blueprint right now, which is like the Uber TOD controller, which basically handles this whole system. And the way it works is like, for example, I can show you by changing the cloudiness here. So this is just me like sort of hard debugging it, but like the system can like change the composition of the clouds, and when I start the game, like the clouds will start moving, and again like the whole global wind will also affect the clouds, in which direction it's moving, how fast it's moving, and stuff like that. And then like based on certain parameters, like what's the percentage that it's going to rain every time the cloud changes, or what's the chances there's going to be a rainbow every time it's cloudy or it's drizzling or whatever. So there's all these like randomness that I control using numbers that basically cause all those effects. But a lot of these weather conditions are tuned by randomness in a set range. If that makes sense.
So how do you decide the criteria? Is it just random? Is it based on something scientific, or is it just what works for your project specifically, and how often you want something to happen? Is there a rarity behind it, or what's the thought process behind it and implementation for that?
There is a rarity. So, for example, let's just say I want to talk about like how often it rains. Right now it's tied to a percentage. So like the system periodically, I think like there's like it randomly like picks a specific time after the game starts, like hey, 2 minutes from now, and I'm gonna change the composition of the sky. so it's gonna change how much cloudiness is there, and it's gonna be like in the system. Like I've exposed variables like, hey, there's gonna be 20% chance that every time it changes the composition of the sky that it's going to rain. And that 20% I just came with like trial and error method. Like I just exposed it. I started playing, run the simulation. I'm like, oh, it's raining too much now. It's raining too less now. Like I'm like, oh, 20% feels like it rains enough when you like playing, but like not too much. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, so most of these are driven by like ranges and percentages that are like using trial and error method to like tweak them.
So how long did it take to make this complete system, and what was the things you learned while making it? Was there like some problems, some issues, things you didn't think about, or was it pretty straightforward to put this together?
It definitely took the longest time. I think like I took a solid 6 months to like have the foundation in, but like then I started adding more features to it. The clouds were the biggest one, right? Like having the volumetric clouds basically run in runtime, be performant. At the same time, they need to look good compositionally and also have variation. That was the biggest one. The there's a bunch of tutorials, and I think the biggest one that helped me was the one from Dynasty. Um, they have a volumetric cloud tutorial online on YouTube that I saw, which explains like this different section and layers of clouds and how to like create the textures. So that really helped, and like I basically took that foundation and created my own thing, just add on to it, right? Um, the
So you
clouds,
created your own textures basically from scratch to work with your game.
yeah, I'm just using noise maps for it. I'm just using like in Photoshop, you can make cloud noise, or you can just like literally make whirly noise or pearly noise, and I just use a combination of those to make these cloud shapes, which can arguably be better, but like it's enough for the style and art style I'm going for.
Hmm.
But yeah.
And how do you make sure it's optimized and functional, considering it's real time and it's changing, and you also want it to look good? So what's the behind the scenes for that?
So in let me pull it up. Metric clouds. So Unreal, am I showing my screen or the application? Do you see Chrome?
I
I don't think
see
so.
the volumetric cloud documentation.
Oh, you do? Okay. So Unreal's like volumetric cloud doc has a really good like performance thing later, or at least it like talks about it briefly. So there's like, oh hey, what are all the things that's affecting performance? Like what are the variables or the console variables that you can set to like make it better? So like I basically do like a perf run every now and then. Like of volumetric clouds, I don't want to spend more than like 1.5 to 2 milliseconds on the GPU, like on the highest settings, right? So like every time I add a feature, I go back, I see what the cost is, and then I see what I can sort of like reduce. And most of the graphic settings for the volumetric clouds are like, so if you do dot, you have a lot of these CVAS or the console variables that you can expose, right? So you can choose how many samples you have, the shadow map resolution and whatnot. And all of these are adding to the cost. So there's a lot of like balancing the visuals to cost and making sure it's within the budget.
And do you have to use the command, or is there no other ways to access them?
I mean, in Blueprint, one that handles only graphic settings, you have a node called execute console command. So it's the same thing as this. So whatever commands you see here, you can literally execute that in that console command in game.
I see.
Most of it will work. There are some only debug console commands that won't work in a development build. Like for my weather system, I have like it doesn't even show up here. So I have like only C++ debug commands that just for
Hmm.
testing out systems that won't show up in the game, like in the final build.
And the rain obviously. I'm assuming the rain just happens across the level, or where the player is, or how do you kind of um, design that part and optimize that part? I would imagine it's not actually happening everywhere.
Yeah, so the rain particles itself, it's a Niagara system. It's a pack that I downloaded from Marketplace, which I just like again tweaked a little bit. Um, it works in a way that it only spawns around the pawn camera or the player camera. So you can see like I kept just placed it in the world, but as I move around, it sort of like follows the camera. So like it's just like even though there's no rain beyond a certain area, it just looks like there's rain everywhere because it's around the camera. So
And
it's like yeah.
how's the lighting works in relation to the cloud changing and suddenly the rain happening? Does it just um, react normally to the light because it's already there, or does it change anyway, or how does that work basically?
There's definitely some hacky ways that I employ. So for example, you could technically draw a shadow map from the clouds and then have the shadow be very scalable, like it basically will match with the clouds. But I'm not doing that. So what I'm doing instead is I'm using directional light functions or light cookies. So for example, in terms of shadows, I have this material with a simple cloud texture, right? So it creates the shadow map, and then I have two versions of those. One for like, hey, this is when it's cloudiness 0, and this is when it's cloudiness 1. So like when I increase that cloudiness value, I just sort of change that. It's cheaper to use a light function than actually draw a shadow map, I've noticed. So that's one of the biggest reason I do it.
Okay, that's good to know.
So if I just decrease this or increase it, you'll start seeing that the whole world sort of gets covered by it.
The devil is arriving basically, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
But yeah, it's super fake right now. So basically, the light cookie is used as shadow map, and then I scale
Mm,
it up and down. That's one of them. The other thing I do, I think, is like in each direction light, you have something called a spec scale. So if I, which basically says if you want this light to be a diffuse only light. And because of the nature of like um, overcast being like this huge cloud body above Earth in the atmosphere that diffuses light, right? You get softer shadows, you get less specular highlights. I tweak this just a little bit, so make it like less specular. So like I think I tweak it down to like 25%, or I tweak it by 25%. I don't remember those. I think so. Like I lose a little bit of like these specular highlights, right? Like if I'm looking at an off angle like this, where you can see all these specular highlights. That gets way dimmed down when I do cloudiness to overcast, so I can create a more diffuse look. That's one of them. There's
interesting trick.
also there's also post process color grading just for cloudiness. So if I turn this on, so you can see the difference with just that. Um, it has a little bit of a blue tint. It picks up the shadows a little bit more, makes it a little bit more brighter. So I base in my blueprint for the Uber thing, it is also attached to it, and it takes this and makes sure like there's a curve attached to it that basically says, hey, use this post process volume and take some influence from it. For example, this, So this is basically saying, I'm gonna let those sirens pass by.
Ah, the cops are after you. You better hide.
So like there's a curve like this, right? So you have on the x-axis it's 0 to 1, and
So
all
for
the
those who
y-axis.
don't understand that what this is, wouldn't explain what the purpose of this generally, because you're using it for cloudiness, right?
Yeah, so
Uh,
I'm using this as like a way to change how much influence cloudiness has on the post-process volume specifically. Like I could linearly tie like post-process to 0 to 1 and be a straight line, right? So like if there's 50% cloudiness value, I use 50% of the post-process volume, but artistically I didn't want that. Like I didn't want the post-process volume to kick in until like later part, and that's why it's not a linear straight curve. It's like a more like a downward U, right? For
gotcha.
example, let's say I'll show you. So let's consider this point, which is zero point 0.7, and the value is 0.3328, right? So if I go here in Uber, change that cloudiness to zero point 0.7. Now if I go back to the post process for cloudiness, so you will see that the blend weight corresponds to this value that I was showing, right?
Right.
So the 0 point, that wasn't it. Where was it? This one. Nope. Is it this one? 0 0.6. Did I do something? Eh, there was a curve somewhere that I lost. So basically, it's like saying for 0 0.7 in cloudiness scale, it's going to use 0. It's going to use 0.38 of the post-process volume. So it just gives me more control on basically how I want the volume to be affected, right? And so I use that for a few things.
Well, you have quite a few post-process volumes. Would you like to also explain the purpose of having this many different ones? And I'm guessing they get kicked in different times, maybe.
They do, yeah. There's like a few things. Let me break down some of them. So the game has like since it's focused on using a camera, it has a lot of like camera effects like that I call like these filters, um, like post-process filters. So for example, can change it to different aesthetics, right? So a lot of those post-process volumes are doing that. So you have like 35 mm black and white. So those have their own material.
So is it that they're all global when you change them, or
So they're all like based on which setting I'm picking in the camera. Like if I'm in black and white, one or two, it turns on those things based on that.
are
It
they
turns
all
on those
set on
posters.
are they all set on being global when they are not already off, or is it that they spawn around the camera as a box?
They're all set as a global volume, so they cover like the entire thing,
Right.
right? It's like a huge thing, but they're off by default. Sorry, they don't cover an entire thing. They're boundless, as in
Yeah.
they're infinite bound, right? So which
Right.
means wherever you are, they're being used, but they're all turned off by default. So which means there's no cost. Like I'm not paying a cost on 10 volumes for it to be rendered. Because if it's enabled and you use blend weight as 0, it's still the same visual effect, but you're still paying a cost on that volume or the post-process material. So like I don't want to have all of them on, so I only turn on and off like certain effects, which is cheaper.
So you're saying if blend weight is zero and you don't see the effect, you're still paying the cost.
You're still paying a cost, yeah,
Right.
because like it's still active. It's just that the influence on the blend weight is nil, which you can't see from. That's it.
Right.
But it's still in the memory.
And what about the other post processing? How do they communicate? Are they separate from the weather effects and the lighting, or do they have a specific purpose behind them?
So there are like the exposure post process, which is just like for different times of day, I use different exposures, right? Like for example, uh, I use for daytime, I use one for the whole island. But like there's this forest area which if I go into, you can see it changed in value. Where I make they expand the range a little bit because it's like there's lack of light bouncing around in this area, so it gets dark as it would in an actual forest, right? But like visually, I want it to actually see more than you can. So I use a separate volume here. Um,
So you have your own volume for exposure, which has nothing but exposure in it.
yep, yeah. So midday fair. Well, it has some color grading too, actually, just for this example, but it's mainly exposure. So I just like tweak the min and max, right? For like outside, this is the main thing, which is this. It has 3 to 4 as the range, and for the just the forest, it becomes 2 to 5.5. So like it decreases the stop on
Right.
either sides.
So is there a reason you have different process for different exposure for different day, or because I see you're not using exposure curve, you just keeping it simple to the point, artistic. You're picking the minimum and the maximum EV, and this is normally off, and then it's on depending on the time of day, right? So it switches between different versions. I'm guessing based on time of day. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it is. So the reason I use it different is like, for example, if I go to Uber again, um, I use different, um, what do you say, light intensity, right? Like the sun is like 100 lux, and like the moon in my game is like zero point 0.3 lux, so it's like way dimmer. So I can't use the same range for exposure. So if I go to midnight and load the right level, nighttime gets way darker. So you can see the range is like all the way to -2, -2.5, I think, to whatever that is. So there's another post-process volume for that. Uh, for midnight again for the forest, which has different ranges, as you can see here, because of how dim the sky is.
And you have a blending between the midnight and midnight forest. So when you're close to the forest, it switches or blends, or
Yeah, so like the volumes themselves, right? So if I look at the volume itself can have something called the blend radius. Yeah, blend radius, which basically says that it's 800 units from that volume, it starts to blend. So it doesn't like switch, it doesn't pop. You know what I'm saying? Slowly fades into the volume or fades out. So you can increase this or decrease this.
mm,
By default, it's very small, I think. Yeah. So I made 8 times. So that way, like when you go into the volume, it slowly gets brighter as opposed to instantly getting brighter, which is
mm.
a little jarring.
And I noticed you're purposely, consciously not using procedural. What's it called again? Um, Specific lighting values like 120,000 lux for the daylight and everything. You have consciously made a choice to use a more creative freedom on your values, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the physical units can be helpful if you're trying to. if you're trying to use if you're trying to go for physical units across the boards, right? And especially if you're trying to do something that's more photorealistic, or at least like using physical values, like for example, I can have sun being like, oh yeah, 125,000 lux, and I'm like, oh, I have like these lanterns that's like probably 20-30 candelas bright, like a really small, so you can punch in actual numbers and you can see that the contrast would match the real world. But for me, I don't do that just because it gives me more control. Because like I want the emissive somewhere to be brighter than it will be physically. Like even the moon is way brighter compared to this, like the contrast between the moon and sun is not that big compared to the real world. So I take artistic freedom
Mm,
across those things. So I don't want to use physical units.
right.
And I think like for a game like this, which has only like two, three sources and not really that many localites, like the only localites I use is basically those lanterns, which have like a really tiny light on them.
Right.
So I don't think for me
Cool.
it's unnecessary.
And the skybox for night and everything, is that custom made, or is that what's how did you put that one together?
Yeah, that is custom made. So there's a free software called Spacescape.
Right.
Um, it's so let me pull that up. Scape.
So so since you use Spacescape, I mean this is not HDR values, correct?
It can be HD. It can be HDR, but I don't use HDR. So Spacescape, like it's a free software that lets you like create these starscapes. And you can basically like you can see him moving it around, so you can create a cube map out of it, and you can export it as an HDR. But in my case, I just use LDR, which is not really a full HD image because I just didn't want that range.
And the resolution, which resolution did you use to get this
Um,
crispiness?
let me see.
Because I don't think I get this crispiness if I use 2K or something, but maybe I was doing something wrong when I tried it.
It's just 1K. So the stars are 1K, and there's a nebula which is 2K. This one's a little bit more.
So you overlapping or something? You're mixing them together to make the skybox
Yeah.
since you have two different ones?
Yeah, I have like blending and stuff, like where I take the stars and then I blend it with the nebula. That way I get to control the brightness and like variables for each one of them. So I can make the nebula dimmer. So for example, if I do this, you can see the stars are still there, or I can make everything else more brighter.
Fancy. Cool.
So yeah, it's like blended in. Uh,
And your weather effect system during night or different time of day, and the sky and the rain, do they have the same rules and system in place, or do they change if it's different time of day, or is it just the same?
some of them have different rules. For example, rainbow. So rainbow is just an emissive surface. Like I have like this mesh, which is a plane with like an emissive object on it, emissive material on it. So for example, let me turn this on. Opacity.
It's a lot of stuff here, huh?
There's a lot. I mean, forgotten. So, rainbow, since it's emissive, again, it's like not physically based. Like, so I wanted, I'm like, I don't want rainbows to be formed during nighttime. Um, Artistically, I just don't want it. And then the rainbow during daytime is bright, but like the rainbows during the evening, like sunset, with the same emissive, it gets way too bright. So I had to scale it down. So like I do stuff like that across the board. So I also have that under the blueprint, so you can see rainbow opacity. Like daytime, it's one, and then sunset, sunrise, it's like 3%. So you get like a really low. That's how different the lighting conditions are, and then at midnight, it's just zero, so it doesn't spawn. So I do stuff like that, and then I do skylight uh changes. Like afternoon, it's a little more brighter, but the other times it's not. And when it
So
comes to
you had to make blueprint for all of this, and then it detects the time of day. Is it detecting the levels basically changing, or
yeah, I do have they're all tied to what do you call an enum enumeration, which is basically like saying it's this variable called time of day, which has four different types, and based on what's being run in the game, it sets all those variables.
and how did you go about making sure that this all is connected and working together? Obviously, when you're making this kind of systems and doing the enumeration, and then does anything ever break because you have, over time you have a lot of systems going on and things? Do you have to make, is this your Uber system that kind of connects all the dots, or is it like you have to do some of your systems and then try it, and then suddenly there's something wrong with your plants, or there's something wrong with the snow, it's too white, or there is something wrong with the water effects, they're giving some issues, or is it normally straightforward when you try and build all of these individual systems to work with, the bigger picture of your game?
So it's a little bit of both, right? If you're planning to build a complex system like this, you want to take baby steps. No, regardless of how big a system is, it's always about small steps. So like if I'm planning for something this big, I think about one chunk at a time. I'm like, how do I even make the clouds move with the wind, right? I'm like, how do I make the global wind? Like step one, right? And I plan about like how to tie them together. Then like so you go down the list when you're building systems, you just make modules that you can just like add. Like you'll have like a cloud module, you'll have like a rain module or a wind module that is like interchangeable in a way. Like if you know something breaks, you know where that portion will break. Like there's a module that something's going on with that module. So you go look in the blueprint there or the code there and be like, okay, something here is wonky. There's a bug here. So like at least I have a general idea. Or if you want to make a global change for all the wind effects, since it's a module, it's easy to change it in one thing and again takes effect across the system. So it's always about tiny steps and adding one layer at a time, testing it, add the next layer, test it again. And then when you encounter problems because you missed some edge cases, then you know where to go and look.
Hmm. So I'm guessing when you do your photography stuff in the game, it's somehow connected to everything, so it looks right, the exposure is correct and everything, as well, on top of the other exposures you have in the other post process, and then on top of the lighting and on top of the weather effects and everything.
Yeah, exactly. The camera uses Unreal's physical camera system, so it's so much easier. So if I pull this out, camera, cinematic camera. So if you look at something like a cinema camera, right, it Unreal actually makes it easier to incorporate this because they have all these physical attributes exposed, right? You literally have like focal length, aperture, shutter speed, anything you want to set to what complexity. So these are just exposed in my system, and then I just set that using the UI.
And because if you wanted to, you could have used the camera setting to control the exposures as well, right?
Hmm.
But you can, the player override it, obviously. They can make it dimmer and darker if they wanted to.
Yeah, they can do that. So um The way I do that is in cameras, you have something called the exposure compensation, right? So you can like expose it to a certain EV and you can offset the whole scale by this much or that much. So that's been my idea. So if you look at here, I have the same thing called EV compensation. So I can make the whole thing brighter or dimmer. So this is taking the current exposure that's in the game. So for this scenario, it's the daytime, right? It's taking whatever data and post process exposure is there. It's tipping the whole scale. Oh, I pressed some button I should have pressed.
Okay.
But it tips the whole scale, and that's how you
Okay.
control it.
Hmm. So, in terms of your weather system, you said something about wind. Is that using Unreal's? Is there an inbuilt system that you have to calibrate your own and then connect it to the clouds and then make it work with the trees and the grass and other stuff, or is there something it doesn't include in the system at all, or you know?
It's something I wrote on my own. It's like a material function. Let me find where it is. It's been so long since I made all this. It's like I have to dig through.
Wow, should have thought about that before coming on stream. Just kidding.
Hmm, two functions. My god, that compiling shader is killing my system.
Oh my god, that's what happens when you make a photography game with the weather system and everything. And you
So
were gonna
there's
add
a
some.
there's a
You were gonna. Sorry, go on.
oh, you're fine. So there's a material function that's called wind foliage, right? Uh, and so material functions are basically reusable code that you can use in materials. So if you have like if you have two different trees like the cherry blossom and you have like the spruce or the fir tree, right? Like you can, even though they're using different materials, I can just plug in. Actually, let me find.
The life of a technical artist.
So I can like have, so you see that there's a material function node called wind foliage. So if I open it, it opens up this module or a reusable code where I can do all the math behind it. Basically, I'm like, hey, this is micro wind and macro wind or whatever, like how much, all this wind stuff that I need. And then I can just put that node in a material, and that basically turns on the wind uh, feature, right? So that's when I said like make modules. That's There's just like something you can attach to a different parts. This is one of them, right? So you have the same thing for wetness too. So like I can just plug this material function to any material, and then it starts generating droplets or water dripping or gets puddles, whatever, which I can control globally. So like it's
And that's detecting if it rains or not.
yeah, when it starts raining, I turn on certain global parameters, and because those materials that I have plugged in are using these functions, right? Uh, then it automatically starts displaying droplets or puddles and whatnot.
And is that random, or is that like how long has it raining? Then do this much, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's basically how it goes. So if it starts raining, I think like 8 seconds, 15 seconds into when it starts raining, the puddles start to slowly form. And then when it stops raining, it takes a few more, I think like 20-30 seconds for the puddles to disappear slowly. So
Hmm.
it starts and stops as the rain starts and stops.
And how is it all? How was all of this in terms of getting into work in terms of optimization as well? Was that like a process as well? Does it cost a lot to do this? And you had to like make sure the timing and everything was correct in spawning and eliminating them, or how does that work?
In terms of just like since
Because
so
one thing I think is important to point out for those who are, because there's quite a few watching, is that this is all optimized game. This is not like just, it's not just pretty. These are, is it like 30 FPS at least that you managed to do everything on, or how was it?
I'm targeting a specific thing. So like I have a 2070S. So I'm targeting like I have like 8 graphic settings. So on like the high one, like the ultra one, I'm targeting 60 FPS. So yes, performance is crucial. So like I think like stuff like these modules help a lot, right? Like for example, let me find the water droplet.
So is there any example where you sacrificed something or needed to do something more or less to kind of make it, more optimized?
Here's a one example, right? Like this is the water droplet texture. And I used another tutorial for this too. Like it's from this person called Ben Cloward. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I think he's in BioWare. So he has this amazing tutorial about droplets. And then what he does is like he packs the textures into different channels. So like stuff like this is like, oh yeah, this texture is going to be in memory. It's being used by literally all the material functions that's referencing that this texture, right? So it's only loaded up once and it's been used different ways and sampled different ways across the game. So like that's one example of like optimizing because you're reusing the texture, you're reusing the code, you're just like manipulating a lot of things. So like honestly, the water droplet and um the whole wetness thing is not that expensive because it's just using an additional texture to manipulate like roughness and some base color.
So this is a
So
material that suddenly comes on top of the otherwise dry material, I suppose, right? And then
yeah,
do
let me
they
show
move?
you.
Do they animate as well, or is it just
They do animate. So let me turn it
fancy
on.
shit? Fancy shit. If I say it enough time, YouTube will block me later.
Yeah, it takes a second to start the game because I have so many shit running. So
I want to see the water droplets in action with rain, obviously.
yeah, so you can see the clouds forming. Added debug, and then it starts
Run!
raining.
Sauron is coming.
You get the brightness up a little bit. So if I fast forward the simulation a little bit, you can see that the puddles are here. Then if I like try to find a different rock.
Run!
Okay, so if you, it's sort of hard to tell, but you can start seeing, actually, yeah, now you can tell. So you can start seeing the droplets here, right? So if I change the cloudiness to all the way to 0, it's gonna take a second, but it'll start slowly going. Well, I guess the debug isn't working that well, but it basically forms and goes away as it starts raining.
Cool. Fancy stuff. So this uh, material component thing function, I guess it's really the proper term, is on everything in the game, basically.
Most of the things that I want water droplets on or ripples on, right? Like for example, this thing doesn't have water droplets, but it has water ripples, right? Because when
Right.
the water is hitting a water surface, it's gonna be ripples. Um, so like yeah, most of the hard surface, like most of it, like the terrain, the rocks, all of them have different parts of the stuff. One of them have puddles. I don't want to generate puddles on any of these. I just have to generate puddles on the terrain. So only puddles will be on those things.
So you've done rain. Do you have you are you planning on doing snow?
There is snow.
There is snow.
So um, right now it's just based on the player's altitude. So like when they're low, let me show you. When they're below a certain altitude, it'll be raining. As you go higher, it it starts raining. It starts snowing. So if I do this, so you can see it's like raining now, and as I go higher, the rain slowly starts turning into snow.
And then you have ice and stuff.
It doesn't form dynamically, but like top parts of the mountain has like ice and stuff like that here, like snow and ice.
Are you planning on adding like snow on the bottom as well, so it kind of goes on top of all the trees
I
and
see.
stuff and
There's
ground?
a rainbow. Um, there is some snow, but I don't plan on putting dynamically generated snow. Like nothing forms dynamically.
Cool. How about the volcano?
Oh, it's a lightning.
I saw a lightning. That's why you get the question volcano.
That's what, and yeah. Volcano. No, I'm not gonna do volcano.
Mm. So how does the lightning work? Is that like a plane with texture, or is that a particle, or
Yeah, it's a particle effect that I got from the same snow and rain pack. It just spawns. Oh,
are you
it's crazy.
gonna have it hit something and so it's gonna go on fire or something? I mean, you are
No,
obviously have a lot of stuff going on here. Let me just see. Edwin is like, Ahmed wants a snowy volcano. Give it to me. I want a snowy volcano. Um, well, I actually want. I wanted him to add wildlife, which is he's doing it anyway. So that's happening eventually, I guess. Crowd, is it called crowd AI? Crowd or something? You have birds and stuff. You had some fishes too, right?
there's some fishes here. Yeah, they'll be swimming about.
Do they ever jump out?
Nah, they just swim around. There's some
Are you
here.
gonna add fishing function, fishing game
Nah,
while you're at it?
I'm but one man.
No, it doesn't look like it. There's like 10 people in you doing 10 different things.
We have the skill in camp here, though.
So
It's
the
just.
the the wind and everything, they affect everything that's foliage.
Yeah.
Does it affect anything else?
It affects the clouds. It affects the water. It affects the particles. So let me show you. So, mm, so if I have see these leaves flying about. So let's say I increase the wind in specific direction, right? So the wind is only two-dimensional, x and y. Doesn't really increase in height.
Right.
Just basically, it is blowing this direction or that direction. Basically, that's
Hmm.
it, x and y. So if I make it, you can see that it starts moving in that direction. If I do it the other way, then it'll start moving this direction.
And how much leaf do you have? Is there like this is the minimum amount or a maximum amount, or do you ever go like, is there like an opportunity where you're like in the forest and there's a lot of bushes and there's like a lot of leaves going, or is it because there's obviously a cost involved uh, if you go overboard?
I mean, these are like simple planes, right? They're not super expensive, so I can push it. Like, there's definitely like there's this aspen, excuse me, aspen tree sort of forest here. think I pushed the particles way more here. Like you'll see stuff flying about everywhere. So if I increase this, you can see it's all over. But yeah, I can push it to a reasonable amount. They're all simple particles.
Yeah, I think that could be cool. You have a generic question from Rays. Any resources to dive deeper into technical side of lighting? Also, in terms of portfolio, what type of projects to work on? That's a difficult question, but I'll let you think about it.
Let's just dive into deeper. Um, so technical. I mean, lighting artists as it is, like I think very rare in the industry. Like there's not a lot of lighting artists, and technical lighting positions are even rarer, according to me. Um, so I started out. I have a CS major, so I started out doing some programming, and then I was doing tech art for the longest time, and then I switched to lighting, and then I'm now naturally doing tech art stuff with lighting. I think the good resources would be get into tech art first, so understand the system inside out, and then sort of like diving into the lighting side of it. Basically, like any rendering papers that you get from like SIGGRAPH or GDC, where they dive into the fundamentals of how a frame is rendered, how lighting works. Learning that, even though you're not going to be writing any of those systems, like understanding it down like to the fundamental level, that's going to really help. Because if you don't know how things work in the to its core, then it's hard to be a technical writer.
Yeah.
So
And if you go to Lighting but Discord on resource, there's actually 20 links. Like these are like heavy technical ones that
yeah,
probably you can. It's very easy to find them because it's the wall of text specifically mentioning them, and those are really tech heavy type of stuff for you to read on and get a breakdown of. And it goes back to the like the 90s as well, so you can really understand how it started and how it is now. So this just to add onto that answer if you don't want to look up all of this information on your own. And
yeah,
the
it
second
is.
question, also in terms of portfolio, what other projects to work on? Blah, 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 blah.
So in terms of portfolio, um, well, again, like if you're talking about like tech art stuff, um, work on tech art stuff like these, right? Like, hey, I made system to like basically control the weather and like affect lighting based on weather. Or like, hey, here's a system where like it changes from overcast lighting to static lighting in runtime or whatever. um, because all of these and in a studio are not going to fall on the lighting artist. It's going to be either like the rendering or the engineer or technical artist for lighting. They have dedicated technical artists for that. So that would be a very one of the nice places to start, because I think like TOD is one of the AAA things now. Like a lot of games just have 24-hour cycle and TOD, and just knowing the complexity and challenges behind that and solving for it will be a good piece to work on.
Cool. Another question, which I'm sure you can make more sense of. Edwin is asking: have you considered storing presets for different weather conditions? Should you want to, for example, start on a pre-made setting?
There's in a way there is. So where is the I store essentially what do you call an Excel sheet sort of thing. God, where is that?
Excel sheet.
Where it's a data table basically in Unreal. I don't know where it is now. It's a data table which can house a lot of like scalars or vectors or parameters or whatever. So I store those in essentially as a form of presets, like for like, oh, cloudiness value for rain. Um, yeah, data table. Yeah, cloudiness value for rain is basically gonna be Oh yeah, this is the min value, this is the max value, so it just houses a lot of those. Let me pull it up. But yeah, those are pretty much the presets that I sort of stick with. Ah, there you go. So like this one, right? It has like what's gonna be the cumulonimbus size for the clouds, like what's the min max, one word is it like defined by like an alpha. um so you have all of these, like this is one of them, so you have multiple of these which basically define essentially what you would call a preset.
Cool. Does that answer make sense to you, Edwin? If not, you can call our hotline for support.
Hmm.
We have already passed our 1 hour mark. Time does pass on when you are having fun and your brain is about to fry with complicated things. Uh, is there any final questions anyone want to ask? If not, we are going to set Sourabh free for the day so he can move on with his busy schedule. Um, if not, Saurabh, thank you again for showing up. And there's a lot more questions to be asked, but we'll keep that for another time and another opportunity when you have the opportunity to show up again.
Hmm.
Is there anything you want to say as final thing, Saurabh, or show or anything?
um I mean, I guess like the one biggest advice I would give anyone who's trying to get into games is like take it with a grain of salt when you see portfolio pieces on ArtStation, especially when it comes to environment and lighting, because a lot of those are not really production ready. They can't run in game, and that's not how it will look in game. Um, I think that's one of the things that I see with junior artists that they really struggle with. They come here into a studio and they don't really know about the process and making things efficient and performant and following certain guidelines. And I think it's important to go in an engine, build something, and try to see how you can optimize it, understand it, and see where you can balance out performance versus looks. Uh, and I think that's essentially one of the read between the lines skill that ArtStation portfolio misses, and I think you should make an effort to follow those.
Right. Also, a reminder for everyone, because there's a few of you watching, click like, click subscribe, stop being ninja watchers, contribute, not just watch and then don't do anything. Also, a reminder, if you want to have a portfolio review with Saurabh and myself and someone else, you may do so by coming over to Discord and letting us know that you want to have some portfolio review. We haven't done it in a while, but when I have time and I feel like it, I'll highlight certain people on Instagram and other places. So you can always stop by and let us know if you're comfortable with that. Uh, there is something that we did start doing, which was letting the games in Unreal, but it's been a while. So there's only there's only there's only one part, uh, and maybe there will be a part two. We won't know for sure. It depends on someone else.
Wow, attacking me like that on live stream.
The Unity tutorial for Europe is finished, so I'll be moving over to HDRP soon for you guys. If anyone wants to go to lightingbot.com, there is a course called it's increasing in price because there's more content coming every day and every week, so it's becoming bigger and bigger. So you can go over there and you can get that if you want to learn more. And it is a little bit technical within limits. It's not like Sourabh technical, come on, but you learn stuff that is a bit technical. If you don't know already, there's tons of other interviews, and I think maybe, yep, we have Sorov here as well. His first interview, it says June 27th. It says here Hogwarts Legacy to Forza Motorsport on the left side here, so you can watch his first interview as well. We don't do a lot of shorts anymore because it's very time consuming to do shorts, but there is still a few collection of shorts you can watch. If you want to be part of a new lighting challenge using this environment here you can see on top, let us know. Join Discord. Show your interest, and we will find time to launch that as well. If you're interested in lighting mentorship, which technically there's a couple of us who can help you professionally, so you can always join the lighting mentorship and learn stuff there as well. And some last questions. Let's see. Ray's he was asking, I'm also CS graduate myself, and I'm pursuing tech up. So my question would be, why you didn't pursue a pure programming role and went with tech art instead? Just say it.
Um, I I hate programming. So and I wasn't like really good at the math. And the like so tech art is like I can program enough that I don't have to do that every single day, but I also like I'm a very creative person. So I want to do art side too. So I can do both, and like tech art is literally like the marriage of these two worlds that like pick what I'm good at, leave out what I'm not good at. Um,
Hmm.
so that's why I'm in more tech art than programming.
Now, just a reminder, Sourabh is a moderator at Lightingbot Discord community, which means if you want to get some more insight and help, he's always keen to help people when he has time. So you can actually talk to him on our Discord if you want to know more stuff. So we will be ending the stream, but when he has time and not tired, he'll make the time as well, and I will also do that, obviously. So thank you again, Sorab, and thank you for being a very important member of the community, obviously. And yeah, I will let you go on with the day. So we'll just wave people goodbye. Don't show the finger or anything. I'm just kidding. Uh, just wave goodbye, and I'll talk to you guys later. We do have. I haven't actually. A heads up for everyone. If you know some people who would be appropriate to have on stream, other lighting artists, other tech artists, art directors, photographers, interior designers is some people I'm trying to get on board as well. Photographers, stuff like that. Do let me know, and maybe we can get some more people that you want on the stream as well, saving me time chasing people around the world. So thank you again, and yeah, have a nice day, and see you probably in a week. Probably.